So growing up in the 90s was a fun time. There we go. We had the rise of the boy bands. Double denim was everywhere, and digital pets were something everyone was looking after, whether it was a Digimon or a Pokemon or a Tamagotchi. Everyone was playing around with those little things. The music was something special as well. There was the rise of grunge. We had female powerhouses dominating the charts, and of course, we always had dance pop. It was a time of personal expression. It was when people were able to discover a whole new sense of fashion and style, and were able to communicate and express their identity through their clothing and their expression. And although there were a range of changes which occurred across culture and society, not everything changed everywhere. So I grew up in this vast country, Australia, which is incredibly isolated from the rest of the world. And within pockets of Australia, you can be quite isolated as well. For example, if you come from this little island, which is just dangling underneath the rest of Australia, and living there, I was in a small, almost, I guess, suburban area, which felt like a little country town called Lena Valley. And there were two words that didn't exist in that suburb until maybe a decade or two later: diversity and inclusion. So growing up in this area, it was dominated by white Australian families, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But everyone looked the same. Everyone had similar interests, people had similar backgrounds, people were in similar employment, whether it be nursing, teaching, retail, a trade. And it was really interesting to see that. But from that, it wasn't any different at school either. It was much the same. So growing up in a Greek household, I stuck out a little bit. I was a bit different. I didn't have a favourite footy team because I didn't actually know what the Australian Football League was until I was about 9 years old. School holidays for me were spent at the back or working at the counter or filling up a shelf at my family's grocery store, compared to my friends who would tell me about their trip to Queensland or a trip around Tassie. I travelled internationally when I was 5 years old, but hadn't actually been to another state in Australia until I was about 15. So I was different, and that's okay. But one thing that made me stand out a little bit more was my lunchbox. So foods that were common in my friends' lunchboxes included stuff like roll-ups, you know, those things that would rip people's teeth out, sandwiches with really thick white bread smothered in tomato sauce, and little jelly cups. So these were foods that I've never tried, never had in my household, or never wanted to put in my mouth. And that's fine. But me as the minority, I wouldn't have pointed this out or identified it because that would have been strange. But when the majority of kids would see what I would eat, they would look and they would question it and they would think, what is this? One thing in particular that stuck out was this biscuit here. It's called melamakarana. It's a honey walnut biscuit and it's a traditional Christmas sweet. But you can eat it all year round, of course. And it's something which I love. And I think it looks like a pretty typical biscuit, log shape, roundish, not that unusual. But one day I was sitting outside with a friend and we were having lunch. I was eating a wrap with salami and olives and spinach, you know, typical Greek kid. And then I reached in to grab one of these biscuits. My friend was eating his tomato smothered sandwich and then looked at me confused and said, "Are you eating poo?" I was confused by this. I stopped and, you know, looked at him and said, "No. What are you talking about? This is really good." But of course he continued to argue and, you know, poke fun. "Oh, Theo's eating poo. Look at Theo eating poo." And then of course the other kids around heard and they joined in. That was awesome. Now, I didn't argue. I didn't bother making it a fuss. I just let it go. I don't know if I was mature for 10-year-old, whatever it may have been, but I didn't cause a rift, I just left it. But that day I went home and I said to my family, can I take a few extra biscuits? Can I take a few extra so the kids in my class can try it? And they said, yeah, of course. So the next day, the thing that looked like poo became the most delicious thing they'd ever had. And I think that was awesome. I think I was able to change people's minds simply by eating something a bit different. And foods of different cultures weren't known to people in my year group. I think a lot of people in that cohort, the most exotic thing they'd ever had was a pepperoni pizza. So this was a new experience for them. And I find it a funny contrast now looking at how the world works. Kids have these designer lunchboxes with the sushi and fancy stuff, and the biscuits that I would eat readily as a child are now for sale at a gourmet deli for $8 a piece. By sharing a little bit about who I am and my culture and my perspective, I'm able to show others a little bit about my identity. My difference isn't a bad thing, but it demonstrates that I am different, and we all are, and that's okay. It adds to who I am or who you are, and I think that's really important. And sharing about myself, I was able to give something to other people and enlighten them in a different way, and that was able to benefit them through having a biscuit, which who doesn't love some food? I'm a corporate lawyer and a public speaking and communications expert. And in these roles, understanding perspective is of critical importance. As a lawyer, I need to understand my client's perspective, but I also need to understand the perspective of the opposing party. And if we're to look at this from a biscuit perspective, I need to know what's baking in the other side's oven. When you're speaking to people, I need to know what I'm saying and to who I'm saying it to understand how the message will be received. Looking at it from a biscuit perspective again, I need the other people who I'm giving a biscuit to know that they will enjoy it. So identity comprises of many things. It's more than just your profession, your gender, your ethnicity. It's a whole range of things. But these tend to be the things that we're judged on. These tend to be the things that there are biases about or there are stereotypes. But I want to ask this question. Are you going to let that stop you from being who you are? Are you going to let the fear of what other people may think stop you from being your true self and showing your perspective and your identity? We cannot expect everyone to understand us or accept us, but it's our responsibility to communicate who we are and our perspective. Because if we don't, what sort of impact will that have on ourselves and the community? Somewhere where we're often told to be our authentic self is the workplace. Yet this is where we tend to hide the most. Gettysburg College estimates that we spend 1/3 of our lives at work. That equates to 90,000 hours. That's a lot. Too much, in fact. But a study by JobStage found that 3 out of 5 of us are hiding something about our identity from our employers. The study goes on to say that although respondents value being authentic, most said they hide something from their employer, with 7 out of 10 saying that they adopt a different personality at the workplace than they do at home. So the place where we spend most of our time, or a big chunk of our time, 90,000 hours of our lives in fact, is where we are hiding who we truly are for a majority of the time. That doesn't seem right, does it? So identity is defined in the Oxford Dictionary in its simplest way as the fact of being who or what a person or thing is. And I think that's a nice way to capture it. It's really essential to who we are. And one thing that I really value about my identity, beyond the Greek, because you can't hide that, is my extroversion. I love being around people. I love getting into conversations. I love having chats. But when I started my graduate legal role, I was the lone extrovert amongst a team of introverts. So I'd walk in the morning with a coffee and everyone's office door would be shut. They'd be tapping away. And it was weird for me. It was really strange. I felt like the cheese amongst a bunch of chalk. And I didn't want to cause a rift by being loud and opening a door and having a conversation with someone just for the sake of benefiting myself. But it was really hard to hide who I was and my personality from other people. It made me feel really uncomfortable. But if I kept hiding who I was, I would have just exploded. Like, why would I want to work at a place where I can't be who I am? And I wanted to be accepted. But if I wanted to be accepted, how do I do that in a way that these other people would accept me because they are different to who I am? But the study by JobSafe found similar, which I find really interesting. So 49% of people said that they didn't share ideas or perspectives from their personality and their identity because they didn't want other people to feel uncomfortable. 43% then said they feared that they would be stereotyped if they were to share too much about who they were. And I think I was in this camp as well. I didn't want to make other people feel uncomfortable, and I didn't want to be known as that loud Greek guy. But on the flip side of that, why should I hide who I am? Why should I not be who I am for the fear of making other people uncomfortable? Really, our differences should be celebrated, and we should be able to coincide with each other and find a way to make that coexist. An alternative perspective, though, is I think there's a reason why we're not asking other people about who they are and actually actively learning about other people. And I think there's a fear of being labelled a racist, a sexist, or ignorant. But think about it like this. If you were questioned about something within your identity, would you be offended that you were asked in the first place? How dare someone assume that I'm a male, I'm Caucasian, I'm Greek, all these sorts of things. And in some circumstances, it's illegal to ask these questions, of course. But in an everyday setting, in an everyday life, it almost seems a bit insensitive to ask, or maybe a bit invasive as well. There's a level of comfort that doesn't exist in our society to ask these questions. It could be because people are afraid that they might get a report to the HR department. It could go to the Human Rights Commission. Or, even worse, it could end up as a post on Facebook and you get cancelled. So then how can we share who we are in a safe and comfortable way? In my work as a communication and public speaking coach, I've developed the 5C methodology for crafting messages that matter, and I think it can apply to these circumstances as well. It's a 5C methodology, so the first C is clarity. Are we clear on who we're talking to and how that information will be received by these people? So as a child, if I were to defend myself and argued with the kids in my class that no, I wasn't eating poo, it probably would have ended up with more teasing and me crying. So I had to know the audience that I was working with, and that was to feed them. That was easy. And they were able to see my perspective. But in the workplace, we should know the people that we're talking to and working with so we can understand their level of comfort when we communicate information to them. We have to think about it from their perspective. And this quote from St. Ignatius captures it beautifully. First, go through their door, then take them through your door. Understand someone else's perspective first, then take them through your perspective to understand your view. The next C is concise. We need to strike a balance between sharing enough information but also not sharing too much. We've all got a friend who is an oversharer or a trauma dumper, and it makes you feel really uncomfortable to be in that circumstance to listen to that. And it can be really damaging as well. So you don't want to be that person who's sharing really uncomfortable, information that isn't appropriate for public consumption, because you won't be judged on who you are, instead you'll be judged on what you're telling people, and that's not a good thing. So context is really key. Where are we sharing this information and how much do we share just to enlighten other people? What's that level? The next C is creativity. How are we able to share information in a way that's a bit different than just standing up in front of a room and saying, I'm this or I'm that? Are there ways that we can integrate who we are into a conversation and a story? Perhaps it's sharing something that you did over the weekend that relates to who you are as a person. Maybe it's sharing some videos or pictures from a holiday that relate back to your ethnicity. I know in Australia, we have a thing called Harmony Week, where workplaces and schools are able to bring aspects of other cultures into that environment and then share it amongst other people. I know we did that at school, and we were able to experience a whole range of different ethnicities and cultures and learn about that. And that was a really beneficial way for people to learn about other things. So I want to ask the question, are there other aspects of identity that can be brought into the workplace in a similar way? The next C is confidence. It's really important to be proud of who we are and to communicate that in a way that's authentic to you. So don't be afraid to hold back. Using an active tone, we're able to share more about who we are and that information in a way that is appropriate for the people around us. So confidence is key, and being proud of who we are is really important. The final C is connection. Once people understand who you are from your own perspective, you're opening the doors to create relationships and to build trust. So once you are able to share a little bit about who you are, other people will share about who they are. And then you can gain a level of trust and build that relationship, which is really important for an effective and useful workplace. So I want to leave you with some final thoughts. If there are times where you feel that you haven't been accepted or that you weren't understood, I want you to ask yourself, did you offer up information about who you were? Did you share a little bit about yourself in a way that was easy for people to understand and accept? Because not everyone will understand us, but it's on us to communicate who we are to other people. So without fear, I want you to be proud of who you are and to share that with everyone around you. I want you to speak up, show up, and make an impact being who you are and sharing that with the world. Thank you.